Hey everyone, welcome back to another video of mine, where today we're going to be solving Leetcode problem 27 titled Remove Element, right? So we're given an integer array nums and an integer value, right? And we simply need to remove all occurrences of val in nums in place, right? So we can't duplicate or make a copy of this input array, or basically meaning that we have to do it in place or modify the input array itself, right? So the order of the elements may be changed, and we have to simply return the number of elements in nums which are actually not equal to val. So this line of criteria is quite simple, right? Returning the number of elements within our input array nums that's actually not equal to value is quite simple, but actually modifying it in place along while doing that simultaneously or asynchronously can be a little difficult, right? So we simply have to consider the number of elements in nums which are not equal to val be k. And to get accepted, we need to do the following things. We need to change the array nums such that the first k elements of nums contain the elements which are not equal to val, and the remaining elements of nums are not important as well as the size of nums, right? So we simply need to return k. So this may seem really confusing and a very complex explanation. So let's just make it a little bit simpler in example 1, right? So we have a nums input array of 3, 2, 2, 3, and the value is equal to 3. So basically, we have to keep every value that's actually not equal to 3 within our input array nums, and of course our output would be 2 because there's 2 values within our input array nums that's actually not equal to 3. And of course, those are those 2 unique 2's, and we'd simply remove, ultimately, these 3 values and basically swap or add the indices of these two 2's to the beginning of the array. So our function should return k equals 2, with the first 2 elements of nums being 2. And it does not matter what you leave beyond the return k, and so these are just signified as underscores, but it doesn't really matter what they're shown as, right? And so if you apply that same logic to examples 2, we'd return an output of 5 unique numbers that are not equal to the val 2, or well, not unique, but rather just numbers from different indices, and our nums output array would be 0, 1, 4, 0, 3, and we would just basically remove essentially all the 2's of this array, or basically every single occurrence of this 2, delete that occurrence, or that indice, and simply bring the rest of the elements not equal to the value at the beginning of the array. So note that the 5 elements can be returned in any order, and it does not matter what you leave, like I said before, beyond the return k, and so that's why they are underscores in these respective examples. So what I'm going to do to actually solve this problem is I'm going to initialize a count, right? And this count is ultimately going to return the number of valid elements or elements within our input array nums that are actually not equal to value. And this is actually what we're going to be using to actually store as the indice to actually put non-value elements within our input array nums to the beginning of it, right, as we saw in the examples of the problem. So I'll set count equal to 0 because, of course, I haven't actually seen any valid elements yet within my input array nums. And, of course, I'm going to start at indice 0 to move all the valid elements to, right? And now I'll say for I in the range of the length of nums, basically looping through the indices of the nums, I'll have a little conditional here. I'll say if nums at I, right, if nums are the specific element that we're looking at that ith indice within our input array, if that's actually not equal to value, then we have a valid element, right? And so if we have a valid element, we want to take it away from its specific indice that it's at right now and put it to the most beginning or the leftmost indice of our input array nums. And so we'll say nums at nums at count, not k, nums at count is going to be equal to nums at I. So basically, I'm bringing the value from nums at I, or basically whatever ith indice value that is, and putting it in nums at count, which of course is going to be initialized to 0. So the first iteration, or the first value that I see within this for loop iteration of the nums input array nums, if it's actually not equal to value, whatever that element may be, I'll put it in the first indice, or the 0th indice rather, in my nums input array. Basically, I'll bring it from whatever indice it's at right now to the leftmost value, or the beginning of the input array, right? And once I do this, I basically increment both the indice that I'm appending to the beginning of the array by 1, and also the number of valid elements that I see by 1, which is ultimately what I want to return, basically the number of elements in my input array nums that's actually not equal to the value. So I'll say k plus equals 1, indicating both of these two criteria. And at the end of the day, once I complete this iteration and move all my valid elements to the beginning of the array and ignore all the elements that are actually equal to val, or basically occurrence in val, in my nums input array, I can simply return k. And unless I made any syntax errors here, Okay, first of all, this should actually be count, right? Because I am declaring my count variable as count rather than k. And unless I made any syntax errors here, this should be completely fine. And as you can see, this is literally just about as efficient as you can get. If I were to submit this again, it'd go from 22.74% to like 90%. Yeah, so you really can't trust these beats / percent of users on Leetcode. It really is ultimately random. So if we analyze the complexity, this is actually an O of n, or linear time approach, right? Because we're literally just iterating through the indices of the array once, and so it's going to depend on the length of our input array nums. And memory-wise, this is going to be O of 1, because we're not actually using any extra data structures to store any inputs or elements from our input array nums, and we're just really using an extra count variable that simply is an integer value that we can manually update based on every valid element that we see within our input array nums. And so, of course, we're going to have a constant time memory solution, right? So, if you guys enjoyed this video and learned something new, please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. It really does mean a lot. And without further ado, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.